Hello, hello, hello. It's not where we start, ladies and gentlemen. It's where we finish. I'm Anthony Gafa, and you're watching Unfiltered with Gafa. So, saving feels safe. But is it? Is it actually really costing you? Your mum and dad's always told you, save your money. It feels like the right thing to do. I think it couldn't be further from the right advice. Sure, save yourself a deposit, get a few dollars in the bank, and work out which direction is right for you to invest. We're not just talking about horse trainers or farm owners or stud masters, but in general, we are going to reach out to a wider audience in this episode. But it definitely does relate to the horse racing industry as well. Because we do get caught up in the day-to-day and putting money aside and saving for a rainy day. But is that the right thing to do? I think sitting still, saving money is the beginning of the end. It's not the right thing to do. I'm going to wind the clock back 20 years. I first got into the horse racing industry. I was breeding a few and racing a few and looking at the property space within the horse racing industry. And I remember a friend of mine, and I'll call him Jono. I remember chatting to Jono and talking about opportunities in investing and what would be the right thing to do. Now, whether he diverted into investing into some commercial property, some residential property away from the racetrack, or even getting some financial advice to invest his money in whichever way he liked. Jono decided he was going to save his money and potentially try and buy something for cash. And he got there. He had enough money for a deposit. I remember having this conversation with him. But he wanted to save more of a deposit, so he didn't have such a big loan. He had well over 50% of a deposit to buy 5 acres at the Hawkesbury racetrack. At that time, he could have got into the Hawkesbury racetrack and picked up a 5-acre lot. From memory, it was about $400,000, and he had about $200,000 saved up. But he really wanted to try and buy this property with cash. But he made the wrong decision in saving to try and buy this property with cash. And when I say cash, I'm not talking folding stuff, nothing illegal, but just having that deposit and having the ability to lay down 70, 80% of the purchase price as opposed to 50%. But what happened was 5 years later, there was a lot more interest in people wanting to pick up a property there at the Hawkesbury racetrack. And I am talking about the Hawkesbury racetrack because this was actually a real scenario for Jono. But this can relate to any area, really, any racetrack or any property for that matter. So Jono didn't jump in on the market. He wanted to save more. Now, 5 years later, that property that Jono could have bought $400,000 was now $800,000. Although he had saved more money, the reality was his $200,000 had only turned into $250,000, and the market had gone up and doubled over 5 years. Then once again, that same scenario in the next 10 years, it happened again. So that $800,000 property is now $1.6 million. And then over the next 10 or 15 years, it did it again. Now that same property is worth $5 million. So if Jono had jumped in 30, 40 years ago, he definitely would have had that property paid off 20 years ago, at least. He would have owned an asset that was worth $5 million now that he'd picked up for $400,000 and only had a mortgage of $200,000. So what I'm trying to tick off here is having the balls to step outside your comfort zone, jump into the market, even if it's not the best performing property out there, making a decision and running with it is something you need to do. And again, I'm not telling you need to invest in horse properties, But that money that we're earning, because we earn good money in the right space within the horse racing industry, because there's good money to be earned in the horse racing industry if you play your cards right and if you're good at what you do. It doesn't need to be the facility you're using. It doesn't need to be in the Hawkesbury. It doesn't need to be at Bow Desert. But you need to understand jumping into the market is a win. Number two, bank interest isn't going to get you anywhere. Having money in the bank is not going to benefit anybody except the bank. So jumping into the market, even if you do buy your own property, but having money in the bank as a horse trainer or as an individual, whether you do breakers, whether you train horses, whether you're a spelling farm, you need to get your money to work for you rather than miss the market like Jono did. So what am I saying? Just because your parents brought you up well, it doesn't mean they're experts when it comes to investing. I'm telling you not to listen to your parents. Don't worry about saving the bigger deposit. Get in on the market because you're not going to be able to keep up with the market. Jump in, invest, and watch that property grow. You're going to be in a situation where you won't be able to afford to get into that market. We hear it all the time. The Australian property market is beyond reach. So get some balls, get your deposit together, go and see the bank, and buy a property. I'm going to tap into my old life. I used to be a sparky, and I had a really good electrical business. And I managed to secure a lot of contracts. These contracts needed vans. Dave Taylor, my office manager at the time, I recruited Dave, one of my first employees. I said, mate, head down to the auctions and go and pick up 8 or 10 vans. It was a really good idea to pick up some ex-Telstra vans because they were decked out, ready to go. I didn't need to fit them out. They already had racks. They had roof racks, shelving inside. They were perfect for what we needed. So it made a lot of sense. And I feel within the horse racing industry, trainers or breeders can overcapitalise on what they need for the farm or what they need to run a stable. But we'll go into that a little bit later on. Anyway, I needed these vans, went down to the auction. We just bought these vans with cash. 8 vans, $20,000 each, $160,000 gone. I didn't know back then the power of using someone else's money. Why didn't I establish a shuttle mortgage back then? Why didn't I do a hire purchase on these vehicles? The reality was I could have bought 3 houses back then. $160,000, $50,000 or $60,000 deposit on one house, times 3, 30 years ago, those houses now are worth $1 million each. I could have picked them up for $150,000 each. So using my money to invest in something that's growing in value, in an asset, as opposed to having bragging rights with my initials on a van that I own, there was no merit in that whatsoever. Why was I buying my own vehicles? And it made a lot of sense to me at the time. I was the youngest person in my company, or one of the youngest people in my company. Everybody had mortgages, everybody had families to feed. So I thought, I needed the security of owning these vans. But the reality was I could have invested that $160,000 and bought some houses, and they'd be worth $3 or $4 million today, as opposed to vans that are probably in a scrap pile somewhere. We all know that vans, vehicles depreciate in value. Why does a farm need to go and buy 10 new Hiluxes with cash or 10 new Land Cruisers with cash? They still are doing it. I have these chats with people even to today. Yeah, the big commercial operations know investing with someone else's money makes a lot of sense. So my advice there is, you're looking to buy a new Land Cruiser, you need something to lug around the float. Don't use your money. Even though you won on the weekend, or your horse is worth more money now and you've got some money in the bank, use that money to invest wisely as opposed to owning your car outright. It's not that important. It also relates to your training facility. Why do you need to own your training facility when you can invest that money elsewhere that's going to get a better return, better growth, and you can rent your facility? even over and above renting your own training facility, we need to start thinking a little bit commercially. Can you get an investor who needs 5 or 6 horses trained to invest in your business? Maybe they've got a facility already that you can use. Maybe that investor wants to be part of your business and he wants to take on a farm of his own. He wants to own a farm or a stable complex. Have these conversations with people. You don't know if you don't ask. There are a lot of people knocking at the door trying to get into our industry. They might have a law firm. They might have an accounting firm. They might be able to bring other skills to the table. I encourage you to reach out to these people that come out to your open days. I encourage you to reach out to these people that you meet at the track. Offer to buy them lunch. Understand how they're wanting to get into the industry and how you can help. Having them invest into a facility makes a lot of sense to me. Having them invest in horses instead of you going to the sales and putting up your hand or jumping online, because that's what we love to do, and buying horses with your own money just doesn't make sense. Having owners that want to invest in the industry, invest in you as an individual, makes a lot more sense to me. And you're drawing a consistent income where you can go and invest your money elsewhere. Why am I harping on about investing elsewhere? Because getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and going to bed at 10 o'clock every day and every night and having nothing to show for it just doesn't make sense to me. And it really has nothing to do with how much you earn. Of course, the more you earn, it helps. But it's more about what you do with it. It's more about how you put it to work, how you get your money working for you. So don't get bogged down in the day-to-day. Bring people in to invest in your business, in your facility, and use your money to invest in something that's going to benefit you in the long term. How do I know where to invest? I've got a couple of $100,000 to drop. I've got a couple of $1 million to drop. Or I've just won a golden slipper. I've got millions to invest. Now, make a decision. I'm not saying go and make a silly decision. Make an informed decision. If you don't know, and if we're talking property or shares, if you're not an expert within that space, engage an expert. Just like your owners engage you to train their horses because you're an expert. It's no different. Engage an expert, get some advice, make a decision, and back yourself. You back a horse every day of the week? Well, here's your opportunity to back yourself. At the end of the day, some investments do 10% better than others. Some do 5% worse. Who cares? Make a decision and run with it. If you've got money sitting in the bank and earning 3% interest, as opposed to investing in a property that might be earning 7% income, 7% growth, don't listen to your mum and dad and save for a larger deposit. Jump in, invest, and watch your money grow. Anthony, easy said than done. I need consistent income. That's the easy part. Stop owning so many horses. Get owners. Do marketing. Approach investors. Go to networking events. Get people to buy your shares out. You might have shares in 10 or 20 horses. You don't need shares in your own horses. You need owners to take on those shares. Focus on what's important. What's that bottleneck at the moment? Bringing in owners. Focus on that. And it doesn't have to be your existing owners. You can only exhaust them so much. Bring in new owners. Go to networking events. That will reduce your own individual liability on your own horses. You might have 5 or 6 that you own outright. Oh, they're only yearlings. They're not costing me much. They are. They're a liability. Bring people in. Race the horses with you. Create that consistent income. That will ensure the banks will come to the party when you're asking for money. Stop asking yourself, can I afford this? You need to look yourself in the mirror and say, I can't afford not to. Horse trainers and breeders, we are the most resilient breed in the world. We are entrepreneurs. Whether you like it or not, if you're running a farm, if you're a trainer, you're built as an entrepreneur because you just make shit happen. So whether you want to invest in your own farm or a property elsewhere, like I said, stop asking how you're going to do it. Stop asking yourself, can I do this? Make shit happen, commit, and the results will speak for themselves. If you're the best saver, it doesn't mean you're going to win. Stop listening to people who haven't done it themselves. Stop taking advice from people who talk shit. Talk is cheap. Be a risk taker. Jump in, make a move, put a plan in place, and conquer that plan.